some of us are keeping, including myself, are watching and keeping an eye on, and we will do whatever action we think is necessary for that. That, I think, is maybe some of the things that applies particularly to you as the community in London, but I obviously need to talk to you about other issues and what we believe in as Labour MEPs, and one of those things is very much equality, equality of treatment, equality of opportunity. And one of the reasons that I became involved in politics was when I was a young woman. It's a little bit different now, but when I was younger, women just were not very much in public places, and I felt it was important to do something about that, and that's why I spent a lot of my time in politics fighting for equality and equal treatment for everybody, so that we end discrimination and that everybody actually can be treated the same. And I think that's very important, and that's one of my basic political beliefs. But of course the economy is very much part of that and is a concern for everybody at the moment. And I think there are two things in the current situation that we are finding ourselves in which will have to be dealt with at European and international level. There are more than two things, but there's two things I specifically want to talk to you about tonight. One of them is the economy, because the recession, the credit crunch, what's happening at the moment is not just a British problem, it's a global phenomenon, and it needs to be dealt with internationally. The other is the environment, where obviously pollution, emissions, environmental problems know no national boundaries, which is why the European Union and Labour MEPs have been very involved in environmental issues. We've been very much involved in the fight against climate change. I have done quite a lot of work on carbon emissions, particularly on emissions from cars. I actually had a reporting committee a few years ago to try and make cars greener, and it's been a particular concern and something that I feel it's important to take an interest in as a London MEP, because we must be one of the most polluted cities in the European Union, which is one of the reasons why I think London MEPs need to take this issue seriously and work hard at it. The last thing I want to talk to you about briefly is consumer protection, which has been one of my major interests while I've been an MEP, and it's a big thing that the EU does and something which is not talked about very much. Food labelling. When you go into a supermarket and you buy food and you see ingredients and nutritional information on labels on food packets, that came from the European Union. That was European legislation that brought that about. I've worked very hard on telecommunications, and one of the things that I was very involved in was reducing mobile phone charges to other European countries. So when you go abroad, your mobile phone charges last year and this year will be an awful lot cheaper when you phone home than they were in previous years. And that's thanks to the European Union, and thanks to the work that I've done and other MEPs have done. I can see you're saying I should wind up, so I will do. Once again, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Can I have Sohail speak next? Are you okay with it?
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, I hope you don't need me to stand up, because then I'm going to be holding this with one hand. I think what I don't want to do today is to tell you how important the European Union is. It is very important, and I'm sure the other MEPs and the other political party candidates here are going to tell you about that. What I want to ask you today is to reflect and think over the last 30 years, when Britain has had elected MEPs, how many times have you been consulted by your MEPs? How many times have you been consulted by the people who claim to represent you? From my experience, and I've canvassed people up and down the country, I can't find yet one person who even knows who their MEP is. Most of them don't know that they've got more than one, and almost all of them don't know what on earth they do. Now, you've heard that the European Union has passed various bits of legislation, such as food labelling, which is an excellent initiative. If you read the directive of the European Union, it says it has consulted extensively about food labelling. How many of us were consulted on this great initiative to ensure that food labelling had the word halal on it? I think none of us were. And indeed, there is no halal category on food labelling. I've also spoken to Jewish communities and asked them how many of them were consulted to ensure food labelling in Europe has the term kosher on it. Indeed, none of them were consulted, and obviously it doesn't have the term kosher. I've asked the Vegetarian Society of this country, and the Vegetarian Society of this country is probably the most prominent vegetarian society throughout Europe. And we've seen suitable for vegetarians on lots of foodstuffs in this country, and we make our purchase decisions based on that. How many of us were consulted to ensure that suitable for vegetarian was included in the food labelling? None of us were consulted, and indeed, it's not on there. So unfortunately, where Britain is leagues ahead of the rest of Europe, the huge amount of specialism that we have in this country with our diverse communities was absolutely not consulted in any way, shape or form in order to protect our interests and also to protect various minority interests in Europe. I understand there's over 30 million Muslims in Europe, and that particular part about food labelling was not dealt with. We've also talked about the hijab, and we've heard about how France has banned the hijab for school children, for people in schools. And they've banned it to the extent that they will allow a bandana, providing the ears are shown, but they will not allow the covering to go past the ears. Now we've heard how this is, French are saying that this is a religious symbol. How many of us were ever consulted whether a hijab is our religious symbol? Does anyone know of any Muslim organization that puts the hijab as a symbol of Islam? Never seen it in 1500 years of Islam. It's never been on the front of any mosque. It's never on the flag of any Muslim country. The hijab is not our religious symbol. Since when has it become our religious symbol? I've seen documents from this country's security services that say that our beards is a manifestation of our fundamentalism. Did anyone consult us about that? Never. So have they consulted us? What France has done is quite simply applied a racist law. Let's not try and excuse other countries' racism. And there is a huge undercurrent of racism within Europe, a huge undercurrent. It was that racism that caused the Holocaust of the Jews. It was nothing to do with Muslim communities. It was nothing to do with Israel. It was nothing to do with Palestinian people. It was nothing to do with Iraqi people or Iranian people. It was to do with European people and the European xenophobic culture. Now London is far advanced in culturally speaking. I would say London is, as far as a culture is concerned, as diverse culture is concerned, is the most advanced society in the entire world, without a shadow of a doubt. Why are London people not being consulted on a matter of European legislation which has such huge ramifications around the world? Why are Europeans' culture overtaking our culture? Why is the European culture dragging us backwards when we are the best placed society to pull European forward? I want you to reflect upon these things, and I want you to think very carefully about why that is the case. Now, I am the only candidate that I know of standing in these European elections, certainly in London, who says that I believe that we should have a complete boycott and a complete sanction against Israel for the human rights atrocities that it commits in Gaza time and time again. I hear from other candidates that they say that when Israel bombs and blasts children to pieces, that they say we should have a ceasefire and we should allow humanitarian aid in. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Why on earth can you just think children being bombed to pieces? Why do we even have to complain about it? Isn't it blatantly obvious that that is wrong? Yet the European Union has voted to have a special trade agreement with Israel. What on earth, what great thing did Israel do to have a special trade agreement with the European Union? What? And you need to look to see which candidates voted against that and to see which candidates voted for it. I have campaigned and I have listened to other political parties, including the Liberal Democrat, including the Labour, and the Conservatives. Well, if you want to vote Conservative, the first person on the Conservative list for London, Dr. Charles Tannock, is a notorious member of the Friends of Israel. Every article I've read about him, that he has written, is very Islamophobic. He criticises Iran for having a death penalty, but he's quite happy with America having a death penalty.